But it's harder the older you are and the more you have on your plate, it's harder to learn a language. And so me being 16 and
Yeah,
young and
sure is.
I ended up, watching a couple of kids after school every day and that lived in the local village, and then they kind of taught me like the basics like colors and animal names and numbers. um and then one day there was this man that we were ministering to, and he was an alcoholic, and we were trying really hard to get him into rehab because his little girls needed a dad, and he couldn't hold down a job. And so he showed up to our property at Village of Hope one day, and it was late at night, and so there was no one else around that we could call that could come and translate for us. And so I was like, well, I'll try. And I laid my hand on his shoulder and I started praying, and the words started coming, and they've been there ever since.
Well, hey there, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the KondoSpeaks podcast, and welcome to Life Stories, powered by Lifesong for Orphans, allowing us to do something that I absolutely love doing, which is to shine a spotlight on some of the unsung heroes in our world, to tell some of the untold stories of real, ordinary people just like you and me, making a real difference in the lives of people around the world, especially the most vulnerable of people. And I have as my guests a couple such heroes, and I look forward to you getting to know Ronald and Addison Lopez. Guys, thank you so much for being willing to come and be a part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Hi,
It's our
thank you for
privilege.
inviting us.
Man, so I'm going to jump right in. I got to hear the two of you share. We were all part of the Life Song for Orphans event not too long ago, and you guys got up and you shared your story, and again, so compelling. That was one of the reasons I'm like, I've got to play a part in helping some of that story to be heard by as many people as possible. And so now the two of you are part of this incredible work, Village of Hope in Guatemala. Over the last number of years, over 500 kids that you have you've taken in and you are serving, and many of them coming out of abandonment and unspeakable abuse. And we're going to come back to that. But the whole point of this conversation is, honestly, the minute I share a little bit about what your work is, the incredible work you're doing, there are going to be a lot of people who are like, well, they must be special. There must be something unique about them that we don't have, because we could never do the kinds of things that they are doing, which is part of why I want folks to hear bits and pieces um, of your story. Addison, starting with you. Miss Missionary Kid to Guatemala. And I still remember you sharing so powerfully some of what that um, experience was like. I remember you shared so beautifully. Like, I'm 16 years old, and while other kids are going to prom, I am translating for surgeons in the OR. And while other kids are playing volleyball, like, I'm testifying against abusers in the court of law, right? And while other kids are doing all the fun high school stuff at the age of 16, um, I'm holding the hand of an 11-year-old girl while she gives birth. That is crazy to me. How did you and your family end up in Guatemala in the first place?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in an adoptive family myself. I have six adopted siblings, and then I have three biological siblings. Um, and so growing up, like adoption and orphan care was kind of the heartbeat of our family. Like my parents very much
Mm,
instilled that in us, that it's not about you, that there's a bigger picture, and that we are supposed to care for others. And so I remember, being a young kid, and we would, bring kids from other countries, and they would become my brothers and sisters. And three of my
wow.
sisters were from Guatemala. And so we had kind of just always loved the country. Our whole family did. my first mission trip when I was like 11 or 12 was to Guatemala. And I was convinced from the time I was young that I was a missionary. Like before my parents ever
Mm,
decided that they were going to move to Guatemala, I was like, well, I will. It's always been my heartbeat. And so yeah, when my parents had kind of always talked about, okay, well, maybe we'll retire one day. And then their timeline kept just getting inching closer. Maybe in 10 years we could sell everything and move to Guatemala. Maybe in 5 until it was like, no, God's calling us to go now. Um, so all of us, my big family and all of my siblings, we moved to Guatemala, and it was, while it was something I was passionate about and something I had always wanted to do, it was a radical life change. As one could expect, and as a 16-year-old,
oh
I
my word.
didn't know
Yep.
what to expect, Um, yeah, it was crazy, and just like you said, my life that I knew as, your average girl growing up in the United States, even though I knew about missions and I knew about orphans, it was still always distant for me until I was there, and I was seeing these kids and
Yeah.
holding these kids and doing life alongside these kids. And so yeah, my life in one day, changed pretty radically, and it went
Yep.
from playing volleyball, hanging out with teams, going to youth group, to yeah, walking alongside the broken, seeing some of the darkest and most
Mm.
wounded parts of society. But also I getting to see so much healing and getting to witness the miracles that God does through that.
That's amazing. I was so curious to actually know that from you. And I feel like you've hinted at the answer to that because at 16 years old, in the operating room, translating, I was so keen to know, do you look back on that fondly as something you embraced? Do you look back on it like with fear? Like it was terrifying to be in courtrooms. Like what's that like now?
It was terrifying, but I am still so passionate about it that like
Mm,
it I'll have to tell you at some point how I learned Spanish, because it was only Jesus, and I just felt like he walks with me
mm,
so much in that honestly sometimes the courtrooms are where I feel the closest to him. The hospital rooms are where like his presence is so there.
come on.
And actually being in the operating room, we would often be a part of these surgeries for kids with cleft lip and palate. That's what I would translate for a lot. And that's actually how our
Hmm.
son ended up coming out to us, because he was born with a cleft lip and palate. And so yeah, God is so woven into every part of that. And I'm so thankful that I had that opportunity.
Woo! I don't know, Addie. Like, are you hinting at like the gift of tongues? Like, what are we talking about? Because you can't just drop like I should tell you sometime how I learned Spanish. Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like maybe the modern day version of tongues. I don't know, but when
Uh
my
oh.
family decided to move to Guatemala, none of us spoke Spanish. Like we were seriously like aloha. Like that was that
No
bad.
way.
Like knew nothing, nothing. Um and
Aloha.
so we moved to Guatemala, and we dove into to ministry, and my parents were kind of doing some Spanish classes. But it's harder, the older you are and the more you have on your plate, it's harder to learn a language. And so me being 16 and
Yeah,
young, and
sure is.
I ended up, watching a couple of kids after school every day, and that lived in the local village, and then they kind of taught me like the basics, like colors and animal names and numbers. um and then one day there was this man that we were ministering to, and he was an alcoholic, and we were trying really hard to get him into rehab because his little girls needed a dad, and he couldn't hold down a job. And so he showed up to our property at Village of Hope one day, and it was late at night, and so there was no one else around that we could call that could come and translate for us. And so I was like, well, I'll try. And I laid my hand on his shoulder and I started praying, and the words started coming, and they've been there ever since.
Come on. Really?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
The
Which I
things God does when you step
oh
into those spaces, and I love even you talking about like the fear. I felt fear, but we felt called. Like I felt inadequate, and yet I felt equipped in the moment. It's not like, oh,
that
he'll do it while you're sitting in safety. It's like you couldn't talk about a more, I needed it in the moment and I didn't have it. And heaven said, well, we do. That's amazing. Stop it.
I always tell people if like I know it's so scary to step out in faith, but when God calls you to
Mm.
something, He's going to
Woo.
provide. And
He will.
granted, that can look different. Maybe He's going to bring alongside a friend who's going to translate for you,
Yep.
or maybe He's going to give you yourself the language, but He will be with you
Yeah.
every step of the way. And that's something that we've seen over and over again.
Woo. Okay. So then at some point, you start to enjoy some of the local provisions in Guatemala because obviously you met Ronald. So how did that situation happen? How did the two of you guys meet?
Um,
That's a long and crazy story. We're gonna go to
Is it
this.
really? Okay,
Yeah.
Ronald, tell me this. Take the meeting side away. Tell me, what is your first memory of seeing or meeting Addie? And it might be different from the two of you, where you're like, I remember seeing her, in a courtroom, and she's like, I never noticed him. What was your first memory of seeing her?
Basically, that's the story. No,
No.
no. So I applied for a job at Voyager Hope for translator, and I remember they called me, and I came into the office, and like they opened the door, and there was she was sitting in her desk, and I was like, whoa, like she's beautiful, but I was like, she's.
Oh.
I was like, I have no chance. So
Oh man, that's incredible.
but
Hey, Lynn,
anyway,
when this episode of the Lopez series comes out in the docu series, like that's going to be a fun one to watch. Like the first time he saw you. Wait, so Addie, you don't remember this?
well, I
what?
do because here's what happened that he doesn't want to tell you. So I went on to interview him, and he was like head over heel, couldn't even get through an interview. Okay, but
Well, my
I
English was not that
Oh
great. And
no,
I
that's
mean, I like
so
her,
sweet.
and it was supposed to be just her parents. But then when we were walking to the office room, her mom decided to call her into the interview. So I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, I'm not gonna get the job. And like, I got nervous. So she comes in, and I'm
That's
like,
amazing.
I mean, my English wasn't that good at that time, and I don't know. It's her fault that I didn't do good in the interview, but
so I didn't want to hire him. I was like,
That
nope.
sounds like an Adam and Eve situation.
But he did. He got the job, and it took a long time
a
for
long
me
time.
to finally warm up to him.
That's amazing. Got the job and got the girl eventually. Didn't happen. That part didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, that took a while, but
Oh, amazing. I'm going to flash forward a little bit. And so, um, Addison, so you lived in Guatemala as a missionary kid, and I love the fact that I feel like I need to correct that phrase. It's like, oh no, 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 I was the missionary technically. My parents were the missionary parents. So, however you frame that, but you two get married. It's amazing. At this point, obviously, Guatemala is a part of your heart story, your calling. Is that fair to say? Because you're not thinking, I'm married, man, listen, mom, dad, thank you for everything. We're going back to the US. And then for you, Ronald, like the stereotype would say you married the white American girl, get out of there as quickly as possible, go live the dream in America. And yet here you two are as a married couple, and you chose to stay and continue serving. Um, at that point, was there a shared passion, a shared vision, or did it just feel like it's just practical? We still have things to do here. What happened? You guys chose to stay, obviously.
So at first, like when I met her, I fell in love with Village of Hope and what God was doing there, and it was so obvious that God was had a plan for Village of Hope, and so I just fell in love and started getting involved. And like when I probably like after 3 months, I was living there and doing everything I could. And so
Wow.
since the first day, probably I could tell Adi was different. I could see her passion and love for Jesus, and it was something that I don't know I never saw in a girl, and I was like I remember admiring her so much, and I was like wow, like every time I was like wow, she's amazing, and just like she was so focused on Jesus and her calling, and that I was like I
Mm,
want to be like that. So it was like she was also an example in my life, and so then for the time it was a long time until we became friends, and when we started dating I don't know, I was also so um I started feeling the calling. Ali was amazing to kind of like make me part of that calling, and like I
mm-hmm.
felt that Jesus was calling me for that too. And so yeah, I feel since we started dating, we both were really passionate on serving the kids at Village of Hope in Guatemala, and I mean, we were, I always felt part of the ministry and the calling, and so it was never like, oh, she's doing that, so I would do that. No, it was since we started dating, I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
I man, I'm gonna make a note. We got to figure out how to get the Lopez's to come and do a dating seminar at like a youth conference. I'm not exaggerating because it's so fascinating that right now, when people talk about relationships and people talk about dating, so much of it is focused on compatibility. Like, how do we get along? How cute do I think you are? And the most beautiful stories to me, I'm like, oh man, I was chasing Jesus and I was chasing Jesus, and we met in the work, or we met doing the things that matter most to him. I'm like, listen to the Lopez's. Let them tell you the story about, listen, seek first his kingdom, chase what he calls you to chase. And I'm telling you, the other stuff will catch you in the middle of the work, and you will find yourself like, I'm okay, you're going this way. Well, I'm going this way too. Well, I mean, might as well go together. Like, I love, love, love that story. That is so cool.
Yeah, it's true. And before we even ever started dating, just as we were friends working at Village Hope together, I was caring for kids, and he'd be like, I'll drive you to their doctor's appointment. And we cared for this little
Ah,
girl
come on.
who she had a diagnosis called hydranencephaly, which is considered incompatible with life.
Hmm.
And so she ended up like passing away in my arms, and he was there for all of that and just
Mm,
gave us such a big passion
yeah.
for the kids with special needs. And then shortly after we started dating, I became the primary caregiver for 14 teen moms. And so I was there living with all these teen moms the
Wow.
entire time we were dating, and it's just been a part of our life, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. It's incredible. Village of Hope. Um, you guys shared some incredible, incredible stories about um, the kids that come to you. You shared a story about, man, 11-year-olds giving birth to babies, and you getting to be a part of those stories. And as a dad of a 12-year-old girl, I cannot even fathom that. by any stretch of the imagination. And so, man, a lot of this work for you is coming alongside some really difficult, unspeakable stories in the lives of um, young kids. And I just want to again take a moment to confirm, like, this is not embellishing, this is not exaggerating. When you, Addie, are holding the hand of an 11-year-old giving birth, this is a real thing happening right now in our world, in your world.
Um, Absolutely. Yeah. And probably way more often than you think, or definitely way more often than it ever should be happening. But the
Amen.
primary kids that we care for at Village of Hope are children who have been rescued from sexual abuse or sex trafficking. So that means, yeah, we're getting
Wow.
10 or 11-year-olds who are pregnant. Um, and then at Village of Hope, they're given the chance to raise their baby if that's their choice. Some of them decide to make an adoption plan instead. Um, but a lot of
Mm,
them, if we're able to walk alongside them and empower them and give them the right tools, end up becoming really good moms.
that's that's unbelievable. That is unreal. And so then, how long do they have the opportunity to stay under the canopy of your care?
So that depends. Kind of similar to the foster system, each of our kids is sent to us by the judge and then has regular court hearings where it's determined what's going to happen in their case. And so for some of them,
Mm,
we're tracking down to see if there's a safe family member that can care for them. It might be an aunt or an older sister or something. For a lot of these kids, their father or their stepfather is the father of their baby. So going back to mom and dad is not usually an option.
that's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah, but we work really hard to prosecute in those situations and then find a safe place for those girls if reunification is a possibility. And then if it's not, they remain at Village of Hope. Legally, they're allowed to be there under court order until they're 18. But we're currently working on a transition program that will be adjacent to Village of Hope, and it will have tiny houses so each of these girls can have their own home and live independently for their.
Wow. Wow. Again, I hope the internet is a gift in this regard. I hope that thousands over the years get to hear about this kind of work and frankly get to ask the question, how can I make a difference alongside of you all? And also to make ask the question, how can I make a difference in my world? Because I live in Indiana, and it is amazing how much trafficking there is that happens in our state. It is just so well veiled and so well disguised, and in a non community oriented context. Like, it is just so much harder to be aware of that reality happening under our noses. But again, incredible to hear the work that you all are doing. And Ronald, you said something I thought was really interesting about your part in this work. That there was something in you that felt like, I don't know that I can make a difference because I too grew up, at least, you know, with financial poverty. I grew up here. I saw a lot of the brokenness around me. I grew up around some of it, so I didn't feel like I was going to be able to make a difference. And yet, come on, brother, here you are. Um, uh, was there a moment when that felt like it changed for you, and you realized or believed or bought into the fact that you not only could, but man, you are making a difference?
Yeah, so I mean, how I shared, like I grew up in poverty, so I wanted a different life, and I feel like for so long, I was trying to live for myself. Like I was thinking about myself. But something really changed when I came to Village of Hope, and just to see all the
Mm,
stories and all the brokenness and how God could redeem something so hard and so dark. Like God will redeem the story, and then I will see those kids worshiping Him, and I don't know. I feel
mm,
that changed my whole heart, my whole view, my whole purpose, because I was living for myself, and that was just so small and so insignificant, that when I saw that I could let Jesus live through my life, that, like,
come on.
because I didn't have anything special. It was not me, it was Jesus doing it through me, and I just have to give my yes. And so yeah.
I love that. I love that because, again, that's what I hope so many of us hear. He's not asking for you to be fully equipped. He's not asking you to be fluent in Spanish. He's not asking you, to be free of fear. He's not asking you to have all of the resources. He's asking you to say yes. Will you say yes to the need in front of you? And oftentimes, and man, that's a call out. You're a gentle, humble soul. So you're not going to necessarily call everyone out, but that's exactly right. But for me, it's my selfishness. I'm too self-absorbed to see things that are right in front of me. I'm too into my own, my own safety and my own protection and my own selfishness. And I love, love, love hearing what you are sharing about your story and seeing things and not ignoring them and then stepping into them and finding that God is man thrilled to use you. Man, you guys, I can still remember again our hearts sinking into our stomachs as you shared, man, the story of uh, a 1 year old that you guys went to help. Um, yeah, Ronald, I think you started sharing that story, and uh, Addison, you jumped into that. And it's such a vivid story. I'm not even sure if you guys feel like, yeah, we can share a little bit about it. But that was so stirring and striking, and a reminder about the kind of hurt that is happening in the world and the difference that our yeses can make.
Yeah. So one day we received this call for a 1 year old girl. We started driving. It was like a 2 3 hour drive, and so we pick up this little girl, super skinny. I remember her big brown eyes, and
She had the cutest little curls, and she sat there in these boys' pajamas
Mm,
that were like 2 or 3 sizes too big for her, and we were just smitten, like from the very first moment. Um,
mm,
and so yeah, we picked her up. They gave us the paperwork at court, and we, started the drive back to Village of Hope, and
we stopped at a
stopped for
gas
gas.
station, and that's when everything changed. Adi took her to the bathroom to change her diaper, and when she got back, I could tell something was wrong on Adi's face. And so we found out that she had
mm,
been sexually abused. And so we got to Village of Hope, and the next day we start taking making calls to courts, and to taking her to the hospital, and do all the different stuff we had to do. And then we found out that she had a older sister, and so we were like, okay, she's in the same situation, we need to get her. So we start calling the court, and then we got her the next day. And so yeah.
Since then, two more of her younger sisters have been brought to Village of Hope as well. So the four of them are there, um, and they're thriving. They're doing so good. But we
are
look
they
at
really?
they're doing so good. The older sister, she's doing a training to be a barista. She makes the most amazing coffee.
Oh yeah.
And then the little
Oh,
one,
wow.
she is one of the spunkiest
Oh.
kids I think I have ever met in my life. She's so
Uh,
she makes us laugh so hard, but she's so smart. She has this baby doll that she carries around almost everywhere, and she just takes such good care of her little baby, and it's the cutest thing to see. They're precious.
man, that's unbelievable. And I still remember, um, man, the two of you standing on that stage, and you were two of, I would say, by far the youngest in that room, let alone to be doing what you're doing. But man, you made such an unapologetic declaration. I think you did, Ronald, when you said no 1 year old should ever, ever have to go through what she went through. And I can still remember this collective sense of, if anything like this is going on in the world, we can't just sit back and do nothing and act like it doesn't happen. This should never happen. And there was this collective sense of amen and a calling for us to step in maybe a little bit further into the work that we do to make sure that, man, these stories are ended and stopped. And yet to hear you guys talk about literally the hope and the sassiness that is coming out of this dark story is just another reminder that Village of Hope is just that. It's a place that's bringing so much hope. And so for somebody who would say, I'm hearing some of what you guys are doing, and maybe I'm hearing it for the first time, but I would want to get involved in that kind of work. Is Village of Hope pretty specific? You know, like, no, we have a group of people who help with that in a couple of churches, or is it pretty open? Like, no, there are avenues for people to, you know, to engage in some of that work.
Absolutely. We Village of Hope runs completely on the support of others, and it takes so many people, like we don't even have like big donors that are, just providing for everything. We have people that give $10 a month. And it
Mm,
that's why we're called Village of Hope, because it truly does take a village. It's so many people
I
that have
love it.
there and sustained, these kids in Guatemala for over a decade now.
And it's so cool to see the body of Christ coming together and to
Hmm.
not just one person, it's whole body.
And it's really, really important for the kids too, that they know that. We'll have people that will come down and serve at the orphanage with us, and the kids like to ask. Actually, the little girl we were just talking about, with her sassiness, is one of those, and she'll be like, why are they here? Why did they come on the airplanes? And we'll be like, well, because they care about you. And she's like, I knew it. And she
Mm.
just like, she loves to hear it, but it means so much for them to know that there are people out there
Mm,
who care and who are saying,
absolutely.
you matter to me, and you matter to
Oof.
God. And it doesn't matter that you're in another country. We care for you. It means a lot to them, and it means a lot to us.
Man, that's beautiful. So the Lopez's, if you guys go to a restaurant, what are we talking? Lopez party of two? Are we talking Lopez party of three? What's your family look like now?
Well, sometimes it depends on the day.
But
But
usually,
I love that. That's an easier question to answer in Indiana than the work you guys do. That's
yeah,
amazing.
we have four forever kids. So
Mm,
we have two children that we adopted from Village of Hope. So they lived at Village of Hope, and then became ours forever. And then we had two biological children after that. And then depending on the day, where our home is always kind of open to whatever God has for it.
yeah.
So
Oh my word. So I'm going to ask a pretty intrusive, borderline personal question, as if some of the others have not been already. But so, was that a difficult thing to do? Um, to be these key leaders and figures at Village of Hope, and to have to essentially choose just two of those stories? Was that attention? Is it attention? Or was that for you guys? No, the way it happened and when it happened, it felt like a no-brainer.
Um, yeah, in all honesty, there's the way that it happened that like these two were ours without a doubt. Not that there have
Really?
not that there haven't been a lot of other kids that we would have
Yeah.
loved to be forever Lopez's, but legally it's just so complicated. But part of the reason that these two became ours were forever is because we opened our home. Village of Hope is made out of different foster homes. And so
Hmm.
we opened ours up specifically. We were caring for kids who were considered terminally ill. And that's why ours ended up placed in our home. Um, and like I said, there's a lot of rules about how you can adopt, and actually the majority of the children at Village of Hope are not even available for adoption. They can't be adopted because they still have
Adoptable. Mm,
yeah, they still have an open case plan where the judge is trying to work
yeah.
towards reunification.
Yeah.
There's really
Pathway to reunification. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So they became ours, and my heart breaks for the other kids that are wishing that they had a family, but until the judge were to make that a possibility, it's off the table.
So this is maybe even awkward because I'm literally saying on here we may very well edit this next part out.
Okay.
But you said terminally ill.
Uh-huh.
So how does that story?
Yeah, so we've actually cared
Goodness
for
sakes, what? Yeah.
we've actually cared for a lot of children in our home who some passed away. Some like we have a foster son that we adore who had cancer and he went into cardiac arrest 3 times and they told us he was dying and now he's in remission and he's thriving. So sometimes things like that happen
Oh,
and
come
they're
on.
okay after. Um, but our two in particular are our daughter was beaten so badly. She had 6 broken bones, a collapsed lung, her brain was bleeding. Um, they just
Mm.
didn't think she was gonna survive. And she is now 7. And she can't walk because of the things
Wow.
that happened to her. So she uses a wheelchair and she's still got um a lot of different needs. But considering everything she's been through, she's doing amazing. And then our son
Praise God.
was was
Mm.
born with a cleft lip and palate, and he also had a heart condition that they thought was pretty serious, and then ended up not being as serious as was originally thought. So he still gets a lot of surgeries as well, but he's doing really really well. Mhm.
And thank you for sharing that. And I'm telling you, y'all, like I was saying to my wife not long ago, um, listening to stories like yours, this is the stuff. Like when I was in college, we would read these books and these biographies of these people of faith who would take these massive risks and say these messy yeses to God and do these incredible things. And the rest of us would just stand in awe of it and we would read about it and we would be inspired by it. And it's like, I mean, when the book Forever Lopez comes out or whatever, like this is you guys living in the midst of, you could write stories of like, and then we saw God perform a miracle here,
Oh,
and then we experienced heartache and loss here, and then we saw him do this here. And these are the stories we read about, and God, I think, is saying, stop reading about them, start saying yes, and let heaven enjoy the book that is your life of obedience, saying yes. And you guys are such a reminder and inspiration of that. Like, and the weirdest thing about this is the two of you talk like miraculous things are. I'm not saying you take them for granted, but I think you see them so much more often than the rest of us, that you just say them like, yeah, and then, I laid my hand on him, and, blah, 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 Spanish. And then the doctors made this pronouncement over this child, and just, just thriving. Not easy, but proving the medical declarations wrong. And, yeah, and it's not like we have much, but yeah, Lord continues to provide when we need it. It's just this beautiful story of what I believe God is inviting all of us to be a part of this great adventure. And it will crush your heart at times, and it will have your jaw on the floor at other times. And everything in between, but the surety is it will not be boring to heaven. And so,
I think
man,
one of the
thank you guys both for your example and for your story.
I think one of the biggest lessons that we learned through living on the mission field is
Mm,
that sometimes it doesn't take some big thing or some person who's super capable and knows what they're doing. It's just little people like us who are willing to have our day interrupted. And that's what
come
it
on.
was. And we
Woof.
didn't get a day we didn't get through a day without it being interrupted by them calling about a new kid or something happening. But those were the very moments that God works, when it's not us, when it's not us in control anymore. It's him, because we're willing to let his work happen instead of having it be what we wanted to happen. And so we kind of became, not taking them for granted, but we become used to expecting miracles because they do happen.
Yeah.
And we saw
Come
we
on.
saw yesterday
Come on.
again, like so many times that I could and I and it's truly because, like, all of these miracles happen because other people gave their yes too. And so we see that all the time, and
Mm,
that's the entire reason Village of Hope still exists, and the whole reason it was built in the first place is because people, not just us, but lots of his followers, gave their yes. And I could tell you story after story, like about the time that the all the water pipes burst at Village of Hope and we didn't know what to do, and there happened to be a plumber visiting the facilities. Or like about the time that we received this tiny little boy. He was 6 months old, and he was like 5 or 6 pounds and super malnourished, and we couldn't get him to eat. And this lady who came in on a mission team was like, "Oh, I'm a feeding specialist." And she pulls out her purse and she's like, "And I brought this bottle that would work for him." Like, so story after story of these
come on.
sometimes
Come
little
on.
things, sometimes super big things, that it's Jesus. And we have no doubt. We have no doubt.
He's faithful.
Come on. That is incredible. Okay, so now we're going to have to maybe do a poll. I don't know, like whether it's the Lopez Yes will be the title of the book, Lopez Forever, or Lopez Interrupted. I'm not quite sure, but man, may we all be super interruptible. And it's funny to me when you were talking about like just being willing to have my day interrupted. I'm like, man, I can think about four books at the beginning of the New Testament of this dude who was constantly interrupted. I mean, how many stories start with like, and Jesus was on his way to,
Mhm.
and then, or Jesus was speaking, and then all of a sudden there's a hole in the roof, and there's this whole thing that goes on, or some lady grabs a hold of him, or somebody's on a way to the funeral. It's just amazing to hear you guys living the Jesus interrupted life. And I hope that, man, myself along with everybody else engaging this will give their yes and be willing to be interrupted. And I love that we'll have to interrupt you guys to be like, all right, enough miracles, okay? But you can literally, and then how about the time when this, and the time when this, and the time when this, and the time when this, man, I'd love to worship with you guys in church someday, because I bet you guys worship different when you've seen him move the way you have. And so, man, I'm thankful for you guys so much. Thanks for your time and your story and just injecting our hearts with a little more faith to say yes. Definitely appreciate you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for what you're doing to advocate for the kids like the ones at Village of Hope. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the KondoSpeaks podcast powered by Lifesong. Lifesong believes that everyone can make a difference in the story of a vulnerable child. Now, we won't all do the same thing, but we can all do something. Hey, be sure to visit KondoSpeaks.com to continue the conversation, to access notes, to get additional resources, and to learn more about our sponsor, Lifesong. Kondo Speaks is edited and produced by In the Loop and is hosted by me, Kondo Simfukwe. Now, I know you enjoyed the episode, so go ahead and subscribe, leave a review, and share. Until next time, stay curious, my friends.